Okay, awesome. So welcome everyone. My name is Cameron. For those of you who don't know me yet, um, we're here today to talk about Cleantech crowdfunding. Before we jump in, we just wanted to recognize today's holiday, Juneteenth, um, and make a connection to the concept of sustainability. So many of you might be familiar with this Venn diagram, which represents a balance between the environment, the economy, and society. And at Cleantech Rising, we spend a lot of time thinking about sort of the environmental issues happening and sort of the technical solutions being developed in the private sector. But we just wanted to recognize that social equality is a fundamental element of achieving long-term sustainability, which many of us here, I think, it's a goal of ours to be a part of and to contribute to. So we just wanted to recognize that before jumping in. And so with that, I'm gonna just run through a brief agenda of our event today. So we're gonna kick things off with a talk from Adria Wilson and Eric Parker about their project, Beam Project, and the topic of Cleantech crowdfunding. And then from there, there'll be an opportunity for all of us to ask questions into the chat and hear from them about things that we're curious about related to this topic. Then we'll move into 2 rounds of breakout room discussion where we'll provide you prompts related to crowdfunding and Cleantech, and give everyone a chance to kind of get into small groups and sort of get to know each other and have some hopefully interesting conversation. And then at the end of the show, we're going to have the opportunity to hang out and just have a little bit of an informal hangout. Eric and Adria are going to stick around with us, and we'll have the opportunity to kind of ask them more questions. Perhaps they could ask us some questions and we could give them some feedback about things related to their project. So with that, I want to just toss it over to Eric and Adria, and so we can get started with the talk.
Great. So I'll just dive right in. Thank you for being here to listen to us. Eric and I started Beam Project, and I think the best place to start is to give you a sense of who we are and why we care about this. So this is me. I'm co-founder, executive director of Beam Project, but my background is that I am a PhD chemist who got her degree from Duke University and was activated to the climate change issue in 2007 when I was in college, and knew I wanted to do something to help transition to a cleaner world with my science. While I was in school for that, though, I realized, that policy might be a great way of being more impactful with my technical background. So I ended up going for a fellowship and getting a fellowship on Capitol Hill. So I went to Washington, D.C. for a year, and as you can see, worked for Senator Bernie Sanders on his energy and environment portfolio. And that was a really eye-opening experience for me as a scientist. I went from like the root of the tree of knowledge and digging one of those roots a little bit more deep to seeing the entire tree and seeing how issues around environment and energy really influence businesses and people's lives. After that, I went to the US Department of Energy, where I met Eric and worked on fuel cell technologies, because I realized policy is great and we really need good policies, progressive policies to drive the clean energy fight forward, but I couldn't help myself from thinking, well, what if somebody could invent this technology to fix this particular problem in the sustainability space? And eventually I realized that innovation was something that was really, really important if we were going to drive amazing new technologies from a bench top to the real world so that people could benefit from them. So my entire career has sort of been a damping function getting me to that point. But while I was going through all of that, I also was feeling very, very sort of pained because I didn't think what I was doing was enough. Even though I was trying to pursue clean energy as a career, as an individual, I just didn't feel like what I was doing was enough. And so that's really where Beam comes along. It's an attempt to sort of find a way as an individual to do more about clean energy and establishing a clean energy economy. And then you can see that I have 2 fur babies that I love very much. So that's just me. And now Eric can share who he is. If I could like get a handle here.
Hi everyone, my name is Eric Parker. So as far as where I'm coming from, I didn't list it here, but I started out at the Rochester Institute of Technology, and that's where I was exposed to clean energy and climate issues for the first time. I specifically worked on, for my senior project, with the Kodak. If anyone's familiar with the Rochester, New York area, they have their massive Eastman campus there. They spun out a Cleantech accelerator out of their facilities there called IMSI. And it's a super unique fabrication facility that has some of the largest thin film coaters in the world, and stuff they don't use anymore because we all use our cell phones to take cameras now instead of Kodak cameras. So I was able to get directly involved and see some of the awesome companies using their facilities, like fuel additives and thin film coating for solar panels. And that kind of convinced me to set out on this career track. I started out in Washington, DC professionally at the Trade Association for Fuel Cells, actually, doing more of the policy and communication side, kind of like Adria on the Hill, interacting a lot with lawmakers and such. But I wanted to get closer to the tech. So after a little while, I moved over to the DOE, where I met Adria, as she mentioned, in the fuel cells office. And after a little while longer, decided I wanted to change the scenery. So now I'm in Denver, Colorado. Was working at the NREL Golden Field office. If you see the second picture there, that's our solar nursery at the South Table facility at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, where we grow baby solar panels. But that's, I mean, that lab is basically a lab for the future. There's so much amazing work being done there. It's amazing to be exposed to all of it outside, just not just fuel cells, but every renewable you can think of under the sun and below the earth. But the difficult thing is actually getting all that cool tech to market, tech transfer, in other words. And as inspiring as the work is there, that's the real difficult problem we're working on trying to solve with Beam. And I'll also finish with a picture of me and my pup, Athena, there in the Rockies. So that's a brief intro on me and a good segue, I think, to the next slide, Adria. So we have a bit of a primer here on the issue we're facing and what we're trying to do to solve it. So as we all know, we're kind of on the wrong track right now. If you want to go to the next slide, these are pretty quick. So we're all familiar with a lot of the axioms that are encouraged we do to lessen our impact on the climate or to help save the earth, whether it's eating less meat or flying less or buying locally, et cetera, et cetera. And this is by no means a call to not do those things. What this is to also acknowledge that 100 or so companies are responsible for over 70% of all carbon emissions. And it's going to take systemic change far beyond what I myself alone can do to actually solve climate change and build the solutions we need there. If you go to the next slide. This is where just innovation in clean tech comes in. There's a reflexive desire to do more. And Adria is going to talk about why specifically we need to innovate. But we know there's all this amazing clean tech that exists out there. There's a huge pipeline, and they can make a real difference. But what we want to know is how do we collectivize individual impacts? And that's where the Beam project was born out of, is how do we bring all of our voices together to demand change, to contribute and support discrete world-changing, frankly, technology. And I don't think I need to explain how a bunch of people coming together to demand something is really powerful. We can see it happening right now all over the world. So we're trying to give a voice to all those people who are looking to do that next thing. So I think with that, I will turn it over to Adria to talk more about what specifically Beam's going to do.
Yeah, so in short, Beam arises from this desire to give people something that they can do to drive that system level change, the sort of innovation that will change the way we travel, the way we eat our food, that doesn't rely on all of us becoming vegans or abstaining from flight, just as a couple of examples. And the reason that we think we need this, even though there's a lot of good work being done in renewable energy in the power sector, is because our system needs more than just solar, wind, and energy storage to fully decarbonize. We won't get there without other technologies. So what do I mean by that? I like to go to this slide. It's not ours. I've taken this from the Breakthrough Energy Coalition. If you're familiar with them, you'll know that it's a group of the world's richest individuals who've put their resources together into this group in order to break down some of the problems that need to be solved in order to achieve the level of decarbonization required to meet our climate goals. I encourage you to go look at their website. This is, I think, a really helpful landscape, and it's something that the DOE also follows to a certain extent. And the reason I'm bringing it up, even though it's pretty busy, I want you to look at the top row of 5 sectors on the left there. So you have electricity, transportation, agriculture, manufacturing, and buildings, right? So renewable energy, as we usually think of it when we think solar, when we think wind, when we think energy storage, it really only addresses electricity and the power sector, and in some cases, the other sectors. I think the first thing most of you think about is electric vehicles, so that's true. But there are a lot of other technical issues in each of these sectors outlined on the right-hand side. I won't go through them at all, but you can see there's over 50 in that list. And we can't address them all with just renewable electrons. So I'm going to give a couple of examples really quickly. So the first one is heavy duty travel. So air travel, or even 18-wheelers and heavy duty trucking. The energy density of batteries is not high enough yet in order to be able to fully electrify aircraft. So we need innovation in the battery sector, or in the battery field rather, or the development of renewable sustainable fuels that can power with the correct energy density transportation, so that we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions in this sector. And if you think about buildings, they're everywhere. They've been around for, like, some of these skyscrapers have been around for 100 or more years. And the older a building is, the more holes it has, the older its systems are. And those things can create energy waste. The other side of this is heating and cooling buildings and the water inside of them. So air and water that needs heat is usually heated or cooled using combustion sources. If we tried to heat and cool all of the buildings in New York with electrons, we'd break the grid right now. So we need new technologies, for example, to make our buildings cleaner. I don't need to go into this here, but we all know that agriculture can be a source of carbon negative negative carbon emissions. And we have a lot of things like food waste and emissions from livestock. So agriculture is something we really need more innovation in. And then, of course, the manufacturing industry at large is where we use many materials, and we use processes that require materials that could be made with less waste, could be made from alternative sources that aren't starting from petroleum. And there's a lot of innovation that can happen here to make manufacturing more profitable and also sustainable. So there is a lot of work to be done. It's not a silver bullet situation. It's really a system level, many solutions all at once need to be driven forward. So Eric, did you want to jump in here?
Yeah, and I'll do a quick plug. If you're interested in learning more about those specific pillars of emissions and some examples of stuff being worked on, I encourage you to check out our Medium. We've written some, I think, very interesting posts on each of those, including stuff like concrete that I've never thought about in terms of emissions before, but it was very eye-opening. So go ahead and check those out. But so Beam as a platform, we've been working on for a few years now. Right now, we're a nonprofit entity that seeks to direct charitable donations towards competitively selected, community-funded grants that hopefully will make a real difference in these projects that are, already in the lab with a prototype, looking to bring that to market, deploy it in a test format to get that next level of interest and funding that has evaded so many of these awesome startups for so long because of how, frankly, difficult and the timescales involved in some of this tech. So that's where we want to provide that bridge grant, that little balloon for them to kind of stand out and maybe get that sort of large scale funding. So the basic premise is, and I'll go over this in a little more detail, but we solicit donations, we make grants, and startups build faster. I mean, that's pretty much what I just said. So if you go to the next slide. So I'll demo briefly our platform right now, what we have live in the field. So we actually have a browser extension for both Chrome and recently Safari. Not everybody uses the same browser, so we're happy to have both of those now. So if you have our extension and create an account, you can actually use Beam today. So if you go to the next slide, if you go to our website, which is getbeam.org, you can see we have a Beam for Chrome or Beam for Safari. You can download right from there. Next slide. Once you create an account, you'll get the little leaf icon in the top right of your browser that kind of just sits there and does its thing in the background. You can see those little arrows pointing to it. But an account lets us integrate with Square to handle all the donations, so there's no security concerns or privacy concerns. And all of your money goes to those projects, of course. And then if you go to the next slide. So once your account is active and you have the extension installed in Chrome or Safari, whenever you shop on Amazon, and Amazon's right now the only platform where we're live, we recognize it's obviously a giant in e-commerce. So for Amazon, every time you go to a checkout page, you'll be prompted with your roundup or your Beam for Chrome spare change donation, which is that green text underneath the order total on the right. Now you can adjust this however you like. It's defaulted to be a roundup amount, which is to say the cents left on the dollar of your purchase. So if your purchase is $1.50, it's you have a 50-cent roundup. Or you can also make it a 1% donation based on your purchase size, or a flat $1 every time. And the point is here, it's meant to be automatic and easy. And you don't think about doing it. A lot of us shop online a lot, some more than others, but this is meant to be a subconscious or unconscious rather way to fund this grant. And so we're scaling this up right now, looking to make our first grant in the next year and building our user base. So if you go to the next slide, I think one more plug I'll mention before Adria introduces our first startup is we have a Give Lively campaign as well, which is a platform for nonprofits to solicit donations, on individual donations rather. And you can use the QR code there or the one on your right to make a direct donation to the project if you're interested. But I encourage everyone to just check out the website to learn a little more primarily. So with that, I will turn it back over to Adria to close us out with our first startup.
Sure. So we've run through our first sort of solicitation for startups. And what we found is that there are a lot of startups out there who really need the funding, which is probably not a surprise to you all. But we also found out that there are a lot of startups out there who need help telling their story about why what they're doing is so great. And Ampere is a really good example of that. Corey and Kevin and Susan, they're working on developing these hybrid electric aircraft. And they've done something that's awesome, I think, and that's they've actually retrofitted a 2-passenger plane, and they've demonstrated a prototype of their technology. And that's really like that's our minimum bar, because we want to make sure that we're helping companies that are actually on their way to building something that can be deployed. And they're actually starting work on developing a 19-passenger plane prototype as well. And if they're successful, they'll be able to help decarbonize short distance flights across the country and create more accessibility to flight for people, as well as decarbonizing air travel. And our first grant, we're targeting a minimum of $25,000 to help them continue to de-risk parts of their technology. But the reason that they're so excited about us working with them is that we can tell the story about electric aircraft to the general public. And the reason that that's important is because they feel that air travel is becoming the next coal in the minds of the public. And it shouldn't be. You know, air travel has benefited our society tremendously. If you just think about how many people you wouldn't be able to see, or places you wouldn't be able to go without getting onto a plane, you can see really easily how much this has helped society become more connected and move forward. But there's obviously something wrong with it, whereas coal is just, you know, a dirty lump of carbon and will never get clean. But so what we're trying to do is spread the word about the work that they're doing, and also fundraising for them. So it's a little backwards. I think counterintuitive. Most people think, okay, you have money and then you're going to select someone and then you're going to give it to them. We've selected a startup we think is really deserving and timely, and now we're fundraising for them. But this is the kind of work we want to do, finding these technology startups that are building something really impactful, very useful and necessary for decarbonizing, and help them go faster. So really quick, just so you understand where we're trying to go, we are a grassroots team, me and Eric, and then we have like 5 other people on the team who help us build, and they donate their time and their talents and their funding too to help us move along outside of their day jobs. So we're working from the ground up, but we see this becoming a user community of hundreds of thousands of people, like some other environmental communities like Sierra Club. We want to help over 6 startups a year. So that's one every 2-month period. We want to push them forward. We want to show progress of those startups, show what they're building, keep people in a dialogue. And we want to, most importantly, show how you and everyone in our community are driving greenhouse gas emissions down because of your support. So that is it. And here's basically every way of connecting with us that's out there. And I encourage you to reach out. We are always looking, we're really excited about having this conversation today. We're always looking for people who can help us, because like I said, it's just a small group of passionate people right now. And that, yeah, so at this point, I'd love to take some questions or, you know, get a conversation started.
And while some questions do come in, I just want to also acknowledge and build off something Cam started the meeting with, is like this Cleantech innovation does not happen in a vacuum, and the climate movement, you know, this is just one part of that. And it's important to acknowledge that we can't just have Cleantech. It's also going to require, you know, fighting climate change includes climate justice and equity. And if you're interested in those topics too, I would highly recommend a webinar we hosted with a group called CLI, or Clean Energy Leadership Institute, on climate equity. And I will plug not our involvement, but those speakers, if you're, especially on a day like today, if you're interested in learning about some of those. But I just wanted to reiterate Cameron's message at the top. Looks like we got our first question. That's a good question, actually. We have, actually it's from Cameron. So he wants to know what the latest for the Ampere is. And I guess we can tag team this, because well, I just want to make sure I don't miss anything. So Ampere is out of Hawthorne, California. Their headquarters anyway. I think that's also where Tesla is. But they have been doing test flights in both Hawthorne and Hawaii. And they are, so like Adrian mentioned, they're planning on testing the scaled up passenger plane model, you know, more than just the Beechcraft or the Cessna, you know, but the 19-person model. And like that's what Beam's grant is helping directly fund, are those advanced tests of the larger scale electric drivetrain and model for the airplane. I encourage you to go to their website, of course, because that's where they have all their latest media and press. You can go there through our website, or you can just Google Ampere if you want to go there directly. And they have some really cool videos that I would recommend watching about some of the successful test flights they've already done.
Yep. And then I guess shameless plug, we're working on pulling a webinar together with them, hopefully for next month, where they'll talk about electric aviation and why it's so important. So you could always come join us there once we have more details. We'll be shouting out about that on all of our streams.
The question from Kevin looks like good one for you, Adria. Kevin's asking if there's a website like TechCrunch where climate-focused startups are listed. And I mean, you talk about where you work now, but I'm sure you have a good handle on all those accelerators.
Sure. I think, well, I will caveat my answer by saying I don't go looking for the websites because I, kind of am immersed in this, but you can go looking at different organizations. I think Cleantech Rising has a list of, companies doing this work. I think Ampere is on it. But places like where I work, the Lab Embedded Entrepreneurship Program by the US Department of Energy is a place where baby startups in the clean tech space are born. New Energy Nexus has a very vibrant Slack channel where startups are always introducing themselves and becoming a part of that if you wanted to get involved and learn more about them. There are other programs throughout the country you can go looking through. Clean Tech Open is one. You could probably start at the Incubate Energy website as well to sort of do some looking, but they're everywhere. Another source is looking at venture capital firms or other sorts of firms that give investment to clean tech startups. So in the Midwest, we have Clean Energy Trust. On the West Coast and the East Coast, I think, is Breakthrough Energy Ventures. Places like Prime Impact Fund and Prime Coalition are dedicated to supporting clean tech startups. So they're definitely out there.
Kelly's asking if our public education work is funded via the same fundraising pool as your projects / tech support. I'm coming from an education, marketing, behavior change background, so interested to see how that component is supported. Well, right now, like Adrian mentioned, Beam is a 100% volunteer effort. All of our outreach and educational work that the team does right now is just what we've thought up on our own. Right now, we are soliciting donations as a nonprofit, and we are directing those donations towards the grant. So our outreach and public education, like the webinars we've been doing, our media, our social media, that's all just community supported and not directly funded right now. And we are soliciting funding ourselves to help scale this. Because this idea is super scalable. Obviously, you can just look at some other online platforms for crowdfunding to see that. So we're hoping that we can scale up the education right along with the grants themselves. But that's the extent of the funding right now, unless you want to add anything, Andrea.
No, I think that's right. Every cent that we raise right now will go to Ampere's grant, go to our first grant. We're still doing outreach, but we're trying to find really, grassroots ways of doing that. We're getting volunteer scientists to help us write blog posts about the things that they're interested in, volunteers from the clean energy community who are passionate about this to help us too. So.
Yeah.
Probably have time for, hey, Eric, probably have time for one more question. And then for the rest of the questions, what we can do is we can try to share some of that information after the event today. So, yeah.
It looks like there's a couple of questions about ag clean tech, and I guess I'll just double plug what Sahib said. And it sounds like the next Clean Tech Live is going to be about sustainable agriculture. So I would recommend you sign up for that. We don't have one of those in our pipeline right now.
I will just really quickly say, I'm seeing a couple of questions about where we source startups from. Theoretically, from anywhere. Right now we focused on the US for our first one. We also focus on the US in terms of registering to be able to give tax deductible donations. We haven't done that in other countries, but that's certainly an axis upon which we could grow in the future. And our ability to help startups depends on our ability to help spread the word about this and to get people donating on a monthly basis. Just to be totally frank, we would love to help as many startups as we can, but we won't look for other startups until we can support our first one, just to show that it works, right? Like, I would never promise to too many people that I could help them if we couldn't. So.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, Adrian, Eric, thank you so much for your presentation today, for taking the time to share about your experiences and what led you to creating this project. When I think about, the folks who are here and our collective desire to be a part of and contribute to climate solutions, I can just really appreciate the opportunity that Beam has given me to, in small ways, continue to feel like I can be supporting the greater cause, and kind of beautifully without having to put in a ton of effort as well, which is nice because, as much as active participation feels great, and we like to find ways to do that, to be able to also passively contribute, I think is just extremely valuable. So thank you both for sharing, and thanks to everyone for asking such great questions. Kelly and Boris and Doug, thank you all for engaging with us. That's really why we're here, which brings me to our kind of next stage in today's event, which is our breakouts. So I'm gonna drop the first breakout question, a discussion prompt into the chat here, and then bear with me as I separate out everyone into breakout rooms. We're gonna pop into a room with about 4 or 5 of you, and you'll get to kind of have an 8-minute conversation about this prompt. And we'll come back in, we'll kind of touch base on what was discussed in there shortly, and then we'll go in for another discussion prompt. So I'm going to drop this prompt in the chat, and I'm going to read it to everyone, and then start the process of moving us into breakouts. So the question is, for this first discussion session, is which sectors other than renewable energy would you be most interested in helping to crowdfund, and why? For example, transportation, agriculture, I think that might come up, manufacturing, and buildings. So I'll repeat it once more. Which sectors other than renewable energy would you be most interested in helping to crowdfund, and why? So with that, I'm gonna send y'all out into breakout rooms. Welcome back, everyone. Michael, good to have you back. Ariane, if you guys don't mind, we'd love for you to go ahead and type into the chat what came up, or what you shared during the breakout. In particular, it'd be really interesting to hear about the why. Why a particular sector is interesting to you. So yeah, for those of you guys joining us back here, be grateful for y'all to type into the chat a little bit about your takeaways from that breakout session. I was sitting in here in the main room, just envious of all of you having some interesting discussions. Agriculture. Yeah, this came up earlier. Sounds like Zoheb's group thinks agriculture needs more funding, touching many parts of our lives. Certainly a topic we've written a fair amount about at Cleantech Rising over the years. It's captured our interest. Tim, someone in our group brought up the massive impact rethinking air conditioning could have. Very interesting. Who else wants to share here? Transportation, agriculture is coming up again. Awesome. Well, looking forward to I'm looking forward to hearing more from you all about the conversations that were happening in there. I think in the interest of time, I'll go ahead and throw in the second discussion prompt, and then we'll head into our breakout number 2. So the second prompt is, do you currently donate to any climate-related organizations? And if so, which ones, and what is it about that organization that compels you to contribute to them? And if not, what has held you back? So I'll go ahead and I'll repeat that prompt one more time, and then we'll send you back into the breakouts. So do you donate to any climate-related organizations currently? If so, which ones, and what is it that compels you to donate to that particular cause? And if not, what has held you back? All right, I'm gonna send you back out. I wanna see if I can, opening the rooms back up. I'll see you guys in a little bit here. Hello, hello. Welcome back, welcome back. All right. Love to see some takeaways typed into the chat. What are the causes you guys have been contributing to? Interested to know what people are making donations to. Also, yeah, who's felt like something's held them back? Something that we talked about before when we were thinking through these prompts, and the reason that we decided to ask the question of you know, what holds you back, is because like some of the things that come to mind for us is sort of this analysis paralysis type of situation, right? It's like there's so many different causes out there that sometimes it's, at least for me, it can be challenging to figure out who do you actually, like, you know, decide to support, and you know, who can you trust, and who is it, where will your dollars actually go the farthest? And these are hard questions, and I think a lot of times, at least for me, that could be part of the reason that may help hold me back in certain situations. I'm curious if that came up in any of your guys' rooms. But let's see. So Rohit, sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. Other startups, let's see. They need an oldie to help them wrong. Kevin, struggle to understand and measure the specific impact his money will have. Yep, I can definitely relate to that. Michael Lim says political donations to environmentally focused candidates, more focusing on the policy side, conservation organizations, and a lack of information and transparency that prevents donations. That's a great point. It comes back to that trust element. Ariane, not understanding how the funding is spent and not being able to see outcomes has been a barrier to donating. Also very relatable. And Cheyenne, in terms of what holds us back, we discussed that the many choices and not knowing the impact are both factors. Boris said, it would be helpful to know how many people are donating and therefore how much impact an amount can make. Very interesting. Well, really appreciate all of this feedback, and thanks for sharing those into the chat. At this stage, our new blossoming tradition here is to take a screenshot of everyone here. So if you'd like to join us for the screenshot, go ahead and turn your camera on. If you don't want to be a part of it, feel free to turn it off, and I'm just gonna do a couple of take a couple of quick snaps here. Yeah, fix your hair, make sure everything's looking good. Awesome. Yeah, just gonna throw down these. Everyone maybe give me a wave, shaka perhaps. All right, one more. Big smiles. Woo. All right, let's see. With that, we're reached our 1 o'clock point here. Let's see, Adria, I don't know if you want to throw in anything into the chat in terms of, I know there was a slide up earlier about how people can connect with you, but if you would like to throw that in the chat, that could be useful. Wanted to just wrap up with two things. One is we do have Cleantech Live #3 scheduled for next month on July 21st. We'll be sending you information about that so that you can join us, links. And we're going to be hearing from Ariane, who's actually with us here today. He works for a company called Bountiful, and they're a company using satellite imaging to better measure and forecast crop yields. So coming back to that sustainable agriculture topic, which a lot of us here are very interested in. So we're looking forward to that. And then lastly, I just want to end with big thank you to Mr. Kevin Wallner, who's here in the room, and Zohab Devar, my partners on this project. They've put in a lot of hard work to bring these things to life. And then of course to Adria and Eric for that really interesting talk today. And it's been really good to see all of your faces